Ta, Dr. Manuel Gonzalez,
Present.
Mr. Hatley,
Here.
Mr. Maynard, Mr. Reed,
Present.
Dr. Schramm,
Present.
Mr. Sabot,
Present.
Dr. Taylor.
Here.
Okay, we have enough for a quorum. Sign off on it. And I have the date, and we'll proceed. Next on the meeting is I guess with the introduction, with the roll call, that's the introduction, correct? So we'll call that for both, and we'll move to approval of minutes. We'll review the minutes from the meeting in September 21st.
And Mary Winston, TLR, there was a meeting following that meeting, but there was no quorum.
Okay.
So no minutes were, that's why it's a little further back.
So there were no meetings. So we're going back to the September meeting,
Yes,
correct?
to approve the minutes.
So, okay, so what was stated is there was a meeting held.
You're good, just,
Okay. So we'll review
we're not
the
required.
September 21st meeting, and if
Yes.
everyone had a chance to review them, we'll have a motion set.
A motion, Chris Reed.
Second.
Who's seconding?
Dr. Gonzalez.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. It's agreed upon. We'll, all in favor? Okay. So we'll move forward, moving on to public comment. Is there any person wishing to address the advisory board should complete a public forum, comment form and submit it to the executive assistant. If that has already been done, if there is anyone present for public comment. No one's present. Let's move on to the next topic, which is topic E, staff reports. Number 1, licensure division.
Okay, this is Greg Olivares with Combative Sports Manager. I'm stepping in for Chloe from Licensing Division. She had a family thing she had to go to, so she asked me to do the report for her.
Okay.
So basically, this is going to be on license applications for the Combative Sports Department. Now, I'll take, y'all got a copy of it?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. First one is contestants. I really don't look at to date. I looked at fiscal year 18, which it's 187 licenses on contestants, a total population of 677. That's both for MMA, for anybody has to do anything as a contestant, whether it's MMA or boxing, Muay Thai or kickboxing. The one contestant license covers everything. So if you're a contestant, you could do all them sports if you wanted to. Event coordinators, this is something that I've always looked at this report, but I see more into it for me as Combative Sports Manager. The event coordinators, here it says year to date, we only have 3. I need to see if event coordinators need more training to help the promoters out, or how can we get that number up? So that's something I'm gonna be looking into. But as of now, we only have 3 event coordinators, and I haven't seen but one of them active. On judges' licenses, this is the year-to-date 62 licenses, and that's judges, referees, and that's it. Okay, the renewals are keeping up. There's a couple of officials that have dropped off who decided to retire. We had some health issues, and then just some who just said, you know, enough was enough, and, you know, they hung up their scorecards. Managers' licenses, this is a license we've carried for a while, yet if you carry a manager's license, a lot of the stuff on a manager's license, which is starting one of them, is another thing that in our rules really don't have too many rules to cover managers. It's more of a civil matter. There's a dispute between a fighter and a manager. So then licenses pretty much stay low because they're usually just state managers, because we got a lot of these contestants that come in from out of state, and those managers are licensed elsewhere, so they don't get licensed here. Otherwise, we would have more managers' licenses. Matchmakers, a lot of promoters I see nowadays, their count is 7 matchmakers. Now that 7, 4 of them are boxing matchmakers. And what's happening now is a lot of these promoters themselves are matching their own fights, and they don't need to have a matchmaker's license. That's why you see that number low, but then there's some promoters who rather just promote their show and they hire a matchmaker to match the fights or say, you know what, I got these 6 fighters, match them up, and they go from there. On promoters licenses, there's 45 total population. Just as since the last meeting, we had 7 new promoters come in, and that's going to be on the Combative Sports update. But out of them 7, 4 of them were boxing and 3 were MMA. And they're throughout the state from Corpus Christi, McAllen, the Houston area, even one up in the Lubbock area in El Paso. Okay. Referees license is store renewals. Our population is 56, and that's another number that Combat Sports would like to get up. Like I said, when licensing gives you the reports, they just read the numbers. But I'm looking at these numbers as coming more clear that, you know, where Combat Sports needs to do more work to up these numbers to, you know, what the activity we're doing. Like on referees, we got a lot of referees that we need to get better trained, work on our training programs and such, just to get not caught up, but have a bigger population of of who to choose when we go to certain areas. Like we're heavily stocked in the Houston area, Dallas area, but in Amarillo, I got 1. So, you know, we have to bring them in from out of state, so I like to work in them rural areas more. Okay, seconds licenses, those are just the cornermen who work the licenses. And each show, we get at least 20 to get licensed on each event that we have. It's very rare that we go below 20 to get licensed because, you know, everybody's always bringing somebody new in. You got new trainers, new gyms opening up, so everybody's getting licensed. And this could eventually also be something for training for seconds, as far as the stuff we talked in the prior meeting, as far as educating them on what a trainer to look for, like in a concussion, or what's happening in the gym where we can't see him, where the trainer, the cornerman can actually keep these fighters from, you know what, you have a mandatory rest period, get out of the gym until, you know, so many days. You know, that's going to be they're going to be our front line to make sure some of these suspensions or some of these recommendations we hand out can be better. Said Amateur Combative Sports Association, we had 2 of them since the last meeting, and here we got 12 total associations. Now all of them are active. Total, I think about 5 of them are active who are continuously doing events. A lot of our amateur programs, a lot of them used to be strictly MMA. A lot of them are tying in Muay Thai and kickboxing into each event also. So when you see our breakdown, and this is a total MMA show, it's going to be called MMA show, but if it's got MMA Muay Thai, it's considered an MMA show. Combined totals, new individual licenses, 1,940. Total population of all licenses that we hand out is 2,866. Now, if you got a licensing question, I'll try to answer it. Otherwise, I'll get back to you. But anything that has to do with combative sports and licensing, if y'all got a question, I'll answer it.
A quick question.
Yes, sir.
Just doing some quick math. We mentioned earlier about the cost of like the drug testing and maybe some neuro evaluation stuff. Is there any thought about increasing the cost of a license across the board to include promoters, refs, judges, by $1 to $2 to increase our budget for things like fighter safety, drug testing, and possible neuropsych testing?
I don't see the problem with that, but there'll have to be a statute change in order to be written in. And I guess we'd have to do a study, but I mean, I'm all for it. I mean, if it's $1, $2 to cover some of these costs, because a lot of these fighters on their random testing, I've had one fighter said, man, I've been randomized 3 times already, you know, and some promoters will pay the cost, some promoters will split the cost with the fighter halfway, and some promotions say, you know what, you got tested, you got to pay it all. So if the fighter's making $500 and you take away $190 off of them, then what expense he put in to pay for his medicals and stuff, sometimes they walk away, minus. Then you keep getting hit at random, it's not us picking them. Right. That's why we send it to another department to pick them for us. That way they won't say, oh, he's picking on me. So we're covered on something like that.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much, Greg.
Thank you.
But again, back on that last topic, we'll go back over that in the panel because they're going over data. for this. Customer service.
Good afternoon, board members and chair. My name is Trey Seals. I am the director of our customer service division. And just here to do a brief introduction. We've been part of the agency all along. We know about the Combative Sports program. And we are now part of the agenda for each of the advisory boards. And since this is the first one that I am attending as a presenter and on the agenda, I'm doing the introduction. Irma Mendoza is our manager in charge of the program in our division. So the customer service division, just to give you a brief overview, we take about 2,000 calls per day and receive 500 to 600 at the moment emails per day. We have a staff of 50 individuals, and they are a hardworking team. As Mary says often, it's the duck on the water. We're calm on the surface. You come in, it's pretty chill, laid back, but under the surface, we're kicking to get that work done.
They do a lot of work.
Yes, we do a lot of work. So we currently have several languages that we have folks that call in for questions regarding, and for this industry in particular. You will see in the report that it averages from the beginning of the year, the fiscal year in September, around 60 calls, and then it trends down towards the holidays, and then back up towards here we are in the springtime. And what I can say is that we work really closely with Greg's group. So while we do get calls for this industry that do come to our division and emails, most of the calls, if they are regarding anything other than an application, help me find it on the site, or a quick question, where's that thing on the site, we will help with that. But for the most part, we do get most of those calls over to our RPM team to handle those questions and concerns. It's usually last minute, many times about a fight coming up and they need something done, or it could be any number of things, but we do not really get too deep into the questions regarding the program. So, but we are there as a resource when they do call, and get them to the right place. Just a quick history, about customer service in general. I've been with the agency for about 13 years, and started in customer service from the Cosmetology Commission, which was transferred to the oversight of the Department of Licensing and Regulation. And we started with about 13 folks at that point, and it's been an interesting journey with growth and continued expansion of the work that we do for the state and for the citizens. I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have. Like I said, we've been here all along, just behind the scenes, and it became clear at the beginning of the year that it's time to put customer service up. And they do a lot of work for the agency, and it's time to have them tell their story before the advisory board. So that's why I'm here today. And I'll entertain any questions should you have them.
Any questions?
No, sir. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you as well. Thank you.
Don't go yet.
Yeah, sure.
You always have to have one.
Yes, sir.
So I'll do one quick question. What is the goal that you have set for our division for Combative Sports in terms of customer service, in terms of improved outcome from the people that are placing their phone calls, or are you finding needs that we have that is specific for us? Because we have people coming in with different languages, so do you have language specific people to receive phone calls and that sort of thing, so that their experience is good, so that we can get good reviews?
Yes, sir. Great question. We seek to reduce effort for all of our customers, and for this specific group in this industry, we do get several walk-ins because we do serve that in that way at our main campus downtown. And so we do have folks come in, and our goal is to, as quickly as possible, get them the help that they need, because they're usually trying to, maybe they're not in a rush, maybe they just need some education. We point them out to the website, we make the phone calls, we run the traps. We kind of act as the guides and the point person to get them where they need to be as quickly as we can, because we know that there's there's a bout or a match, something's coming up, and we want to make sure that we get them where they need to be as quickly as we can. So that's always our goal.
Dr. Lee, Mary Winston, I'm going to, looking at Trey's report, and we've had this discussion, but it's still not giving us a good picture of what they do. Because your group is a very specialized group, they don't have a lot of calls in relation to, Trey, how many calls did you have? You can pick a quarter or
Sure.
a month. I know you know those numbers.
Yeah.
Give me a number and give me a time frame.
So for the last fiscal year, we had over 500,000 contacts for the agency.
And what are contacts?
That includes phone calls, emails, walk-ins. We also interact with Facebook and Twitter. We do respond to customer
So
inquiries
you
over
guys do all of that?
social media.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So this is why we've added customer service to the agenda, because they work very hard. This is the analogy that I come up with, which was really Ms. Connor, our former barber chair of the advisory board. Her analogy, ducks on the water. They're smooth sailing, but those feet are under there pumping because, and then we get this report that says 40 calls and no emails. That's just because your group is not the group that's making the majority of the calls. But I do want you to know how hard this team works. And they have a well-oiled machine. Nick Voenis is our chief of staff, and we operate under his direct leadership, and they do a fantastic job and are always trying to improve. So I just want to, he has a hard time patting himself on the back, but so I'll do it for him. They do a lot of work. He has, how many staff members do you have?
We have 50.
50. So that's awesome. I just wanted to highlight that.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you, ma'am.
And we appreciate all
Yes,
that
sir.
you do.
Yes, sir.
Okay, looking forward to seeing you at future meetings.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to number 3 under the E item, Enforcement Division.
Dr. Lee, members of the board, good morning. My name is Michael Shirker. It's afternoon by now. I'm one of the prosecutors in the Enforcement Division. While I don't handle the prosecution of cases stemming from your program, I am going to be available during these meetings as a resource today and in the future. The agenda says that I'm going to sort of give an overview of our cases as well as trends, and I don't know if I can give the trends. The numbers speak for themselves, but on one of your sheets, it does talk about some of our statistics. And you see that we had 42 cases open since the last reporting period. 50 were closed. So we're staying ahead of the curve in getting to the cases quickly and getting remedies, prosecuting them. We're not getting the kind of backlog that would cause contestants not to take us seriously. The agreed orders were the resolution of 20% of the cases. Agreed orders are really preferred because they show an acceptance of responsibility for any wrongdoing. They're also more likely to abide by the terms of the sanction or penalty, that is the payment of a penalty, whereas oftentimes people will get penalized or sanctioned and not live up to it. With the agreed orders, like I said, the people have recognized the error and they're trying to correct their ways. $32,000 was the amount of the penalties that were assessed. The collected was just a little bit over $5,000. Many of our licensees, it's hard to pin down and drag the money out of them. What we do is oftentimes refer cases to the Office of the Attorney General for their collections activities, or we do have a private vendor also who will do collection activities. We have extra leverage with people who hold the licenses because we can sanction their licenses, one tool that we will use. Next, I'd like to do is talk just a little bit about the kind of cases, and I put together what I thought was an illustrative sample of the kind of cases that we get. As you can see, one case resulted in an assessment of an administrative penalty of $750 involving a promoter's failure to pay deductibles and cover medical expenses for one of your fighters who was injured during a bout. The injury occurred in December 2016, and the promoter refused to sign or failed to sign the necessary documents. After the department got involved, he did sign the documents, and the forms were completed and returned in April of 2017 so that the deductibles and copays were paid. However, we felt that warranted the imposition of a penalty because the papers should be returned immediately. In this case, the fighter actually had collection agencies coming out after him because of the indebtedness he incurred. The other 4 cases involved positive tests for cannabinoids. That was 3 of them in which administrative penalties, that is monetary penalties, were imposed. or when the narcotic cocaine was involved, which is 2 of those cases, a penalty and a sanction of revocation were imposed. That pretty much sums up my report, but if you have any questions about what we do, how we do it, I'm happy to answer them.
I have a question, and I'm just assuming Kerry Hatley. Does your group, do y'all assess the illegal events? Are y'all the enforcers of illegal events, or?
No, we only will go after the licensees.
Okay. Just had a question with that. Seems like we're getting more and more requests to work events that are
Mary Winston, I'm gonna clarify. It's unlicensed activity. And
Okay.
so if there is unlicensed activity and we do get information, the enforcement division
Okay.
will investigate, yes.
Thank you, Mary.
Have you seen a rise in that, or I'm assuming that?
Now, that is information, poor Michael.
I know, and I'm.
No, that's okay. Michael is our resident
Oh, okay.
tow guru. So we've had cases go well up into federal court,
Right.
and he knows the insides and outs. But he has given this report, and
And
this is
just-
not his program. An uptick in this, we can get that information for you,
Okay.
but we just don't have it offhand.
Okay.
So
Good.
we can, I see one of our senior prosecutors that just walked in. We'll get that for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If there are
Thank
no
you.
other questions.
Thank you.
All righty. Next is Regulatory Program Management Division. Lee?
All right. Mr. Chairman, advisory board members, I am Lee Parham. I'm with the Regulatory Program Management Division. And what I want to touch on is the item about the new organizational chart. We, the agency conducted what we're calling a calibration, and we also evaluated our operations. And we now have a new name, division name. We're not compliance, we're regulatory program management. We also have a new division director. That division director is David Gonzalez. Some of you all may have run across David over the years. He's been here a long time. And he's our new division director. I believe that regulatory program management better reflects what we do, which is program management. That includes assisting industries with regulatory and statutory requirements, and we provide outreach to industries and the public. And in the case of combative sports, the management and oversight of the events. So I think the division name better reflects what we actually do. We have had a phenomenal amount of growth in our responsibilities and in the oversight of new and transferred programs. So that was one of the reasons that we conducted the evaluation of our operations and then kind of calibrated staff, and it gave us the opportunity to utilize the knowledge that other staff members have in other divisions or other sections. An example would be in the health professions, health and medical professions section. There's a program there, athletic trainers. We thought, well, we could tap into Stuart Myrick's knowledge and see from that angle the athletic trainers how they handle concussion issues. So that's just an example. We're doing that all over the agency, utilizing staff members. As far as the combative sports program, it's functioning the same. Oversight, the staff is the same, with the exception of we had a retirement, and Henry Villagomez, longtime TDLR employee. I don't know how long Henry worked here, but a long time. He retired, so his position in Houston has been posted, meaning folks can apply for jobs. And it's a part-time, it's a half-time position, but it's available. So that's my contribution to this meeting. If you have any questions, I can answer any questions for you.
Any questions?
I might have one.
Yes,
Kerry
sir.
Halley, do y'all reach out, to try to gain promotions? Will this fall under this group, like, so we seek Bellator, for instance, to come to Texas?
Well, we're not calling Bellator
And I just use
and
that
saying,
as-
come to Texas. It's, a lot of these promoters are coming. They're coming
Yeah.
anyway. We're not really having to do that much advertising. They're coming.
I wondered if we ever did that, seek like larger organizations or different organizations that.
Well, we are members of the Association of Boxing Commissions. So, in fact, I'll be going to the conference in July.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent place to talk to promoters, other jurisdictions. So that's outreach.
Okay, good, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Executive office? Is that Greg? Greg. Yes, sir.
All right. Greg Alvarez, Combative Sports Program Manager. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about Combative Sports now. On Combative Sports events, the stats from September 1st till now, amateur events, we've had 20 of them. Boxing, 39. A combination, meaning boxing, MMA, professional, 1. MMA, 18 events, professional MMA, 18. Muay Thai is 0, but like I mentioned earlier, sometimes we'll have a MMA event, and I'll have 2 Muay Thai matches in there. But we don't list it as a Muay Thai event, but that event is happening as well as kickboxing. Televised events from September 1st till now, we've had 11. Out of 11, we've had 2 of them that are right at a mega event, which is usually a $2 million gate. They're right at there, not at 2 million, semi-mega event, which one was a Showtime and one was a UFC. And the other ones have been, Fox Sports, Ben TV, some of the lower TVs, up and coming, that's where you got the up and coming fighters coming up on them TV broadcasts. And on the MMA, we got the Access TV, where Legacy is an ongoing series, and, they have most of their activity out here in Texas. So MMA is also represented in some of these TV shows we have. On what I mentioned earlier, in new promoters meetings, we've had 7 professional and 2 amateur. Out of the 7, 4 were boxing, 3 were MMA, and amateur, they're MMA promoters. And one of the things we used to have in our past meetings that used to pop on here was amputee boxing. USA Boxing has incorporated amputee boxing into their program, and their ultimate goal is to put it with the Paralympics also. So they're moving along, but they're always welcome to come back if they don't treat them right. And I mentioned that to them, so, they're looking forward to do their first show I think it's next month in San Antonio. And, the USA Boxing for Colorado Springs, the Olympic Committee is gonna come down too and look at the activity and how it goes. So I think it's going pretty good. And I think, TDLR, Combative Sports, got that started, so, that's a good role model, and they give us a lot of accolades and just, also, if it wasn't for us, but, it was them because it was a total effort of everybody working together to get that program started. Any questions?
From your experience, can you have an idea of projection? Are we on par with the number of events? Or are we below for the total events for so far compared to what we expect at the end of the year?
Total events, we're on par. We're probably down 2-3 events. MMA has really came down, but we're in par with last year, but from the previous year, it was a drop in MMA events, and the major concern was just the insurance costs, because there's more injuries, and the insurance costs doubled on MMA events. So the promoters are really watching. A lot of these events that we have, the amateur and MMA, they're tied in together. First part of the show will be amateur, second part will be professional. So that's how they're keeping it, because they're getting more funds in off your amateur where they don't got to pay the fighters, and that's covering the insurance costs in order to do the professional part of the show.
Okay. Any other questions?
Everyone agree, you seen any increase in like the kickboxing? Is it starting to, does that fall under MMA as well?
Yes. Kickboxing's kicking up. As a matter of fact, Jim is heading as soon as he get out here to go do an MMA event, which is the majority is going to be kickboxing.
Oh, good.
And luckily we still have, you know, some of the old guard that were MMA officials that we're still, but you being one of them. And,
Old guard, define that. Yeah, you,
so, I mean, eventually I see it kicking up more, and that should raise our level of activity as far as because there's interest in it again. It's like it's recycling itself. And, but, I mean, we're going good, and, you know, we got it covered.
All right, any other questions? Thank you very much, Greg.
Thank you.
All right, let's move to item F, which is work group reports.
We got
Discussion
the
of-
executive staff report.
Oh, did I skip staff report?
Yeah. It's okay.
Okay, staff report.
Mr. Chairman, board members, Nick Voinas, TDLR Chief of Staff, and I want to thank you again for being here today and for your service to the state. Here to bring you our executive office report, kind of a summary of what's going on around the agency right now. We received some good news recently when Governor Abbott announced the appointment of 2 new commissioners to our board for terms that expire in 2023. So our board is back at full strength. The governor added Ray Callis, a physician anesthesiologist from Beaumont, and Dr. Gary Wesson, a retired orthodontist living in Bastrop, to our 7-member commission, and we've got additional biographical information on them on our website. The commission next meets on Thursday, May 24th. The agency right now is in the middle of or towards the end of our strategic planning exercise. This is something that the legislature mandates all state agencies do every 2 years, and it's something that we take very seriously. 2 years ago, we identified 56 strategic initiatives to address during last year's legislative session. Proud to say that 52 of them were passed and signed into law. I want to stress that everyone has a voice in this process, and including licensees, consumers, advisory board members, industry reps, so on. And everyone is encouraged to participate. We hosted external sessions in Arlington, El Paso, Houston, and McAllen. And we'll hold our final external session here on Monday here in Austin. If anyone's interested, we still have time to make that one. And we have had members of this program attend some of the sessions. For those who were unable to make it, we posted a survey on our Facebook page and our website for people to participate that way. The sessions are an opportunity for everyone to share ideas and opinions and on how we're doing and how we can improve. We also had internal sessions with our staffs throughout the agency in March and April. And we're in the process of writing the final report, and we'll have that done soon. Also like to talk to you guys about your website for a minute. You know, I like to update you on your traffic numbers, and your numbers are pretty good. Over the last 6 months, the Combative Sports websites had almost 26,000 page views for an average of about 142 a day. 38% of those visitors access the site from a desktop computer, while 60% do so from a smartphone, a vast majority of those, and 2% from a tablet. The top 5 reasons for visiting the site: number 1, forums; number 2, results from previous events; 3, rules, followed by FAQs and state boxing champions. Also wanted to remind you, in addition to our web presence, that we are on social media, and we have a Facebook and Twitter account, so please check it out so you can keep up with TDLR events and news. We also have a group of more than 5,000 subscribers who receive various email blasts pertaining to this program. And if someone's not receiving those notices, they can go to the website and subscribe to them. Also want to finish by saying, had the pleasure of working with a lady since I've been at TDLR, Susan Stanford, who's worked with this program, and she'll be retiring soon. And we'll be sad to see her go, and we'll miss her. She's done a great job for us. But we have recently added Brenda Flores-Dollar, who is sitting in the back there with Susan. And I think if you guys have had a chance to meet her, if you haven't, please introduce yourselves to her after the meeting. We're glad to have her aboard and have some great plans for the future with her. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, be glad to answer them.
Any questions?
Okay, Dr. Lee, I'm going to interrupt one more time.
Yes.
Not trying to hold you up. Mary Winston, TDLR. I just wanted to add on to Nick's report. I've heard several times today about maybe increasing a fee, spreading out that cost for the testing. Statutory, that's the statutory call, which means that's legislative, and that's something TDLR can't do. However, during this process of strategic planning, these are the kind of things that we want to hear. We ask for questions, we've changed them a little bit, what we do well. We get a little bit, but not much. We used to say, what could we do better? But it was kind of the same question as the third question, which was, if you were king or queen for a day, what process, law, rule, statute of TDLR would you change? So we got a lot of feedback with that one. Then we asked some Harvey-related questions, had a survey about that because that was a storm of biblical proportions, its impact. And then we ask, what in the next 5 years will affect your program, be it locally, state, federal, whatever. We get a lot of feedback, and as Nick said, we do get some members of the combative sports community. So even though we didn't have you all at those meetings, this meeting has highlighted a question that we can add, or a consideration that we can consider and add to our strategic plan. We are held to a page limit, but we tabulate all of those suggestions and requests and so forth, and they're public record. And those who are overseers of this agency do look at that. So I wanted you to know that this was the right place to voice those concerns and thoughts, and it's something we can't do, but it's something that we can relay to our legislative body that you want to do. And it's during strategic planning, before we write the plan, so that was perfect. I just wanted to let you guys know that.
Thank you very much. As the chairman of the committee, I'll speak for everyone, that we've worked with Susan in the back for a long time, and we all personally have had interactions with her, and she's been helpful with us in terms of the events that we covered, and I'd like to thank her for her service, for working with us in combative sports. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. We're on item F, work group reports, discussion of combative sports, summit topics, and possible recommendations. So I think that with the summit agenda, that consolidates some items on from some of the work groups. And so with the help of
Colleen Trent, Assistant General Counsel, I think we should go ahead and, Jim, you usually do the work group reports because you guys did have phone calls and email conversations. So go ahead and do the report, and then if you're going to make any recommendations, I would do the next agenda item first, where you make the recommendation to rework your work groups, and then from there you can assign tasks to your new work groups.
Okay. You gotta go. Okay. Let me ask a question. Yeah. I have a quick question. Dr. Schramm has a medical that he has to address. With his departure, do we still have a quorum?
Yes, we do. We're still good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr.
Well,
Schramm.
sure.
All right. I'll see you later. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend. All right, continuing with the report.
Good afternoon, Jim Erickson, Combative Sports Program. Just follow down the line of the list of reports as they are on the agenda. First one we had was a work group report for medical protocol work group. We had a conference call for all the work groups scheduled January 17th, 18th timeframe. January 17th, attendance either by person or in phone was Dr. Gonzalez, Dr. Taylor, Dr. Schramm, Carrie Hatley, Colleen Tran, Charles Johnson, and Jim Erickson. And as you know, Charles has retired, and where'd she go? Colleen retired too. She left too. No. But Colleen has taken Charles's spot and is doing a great job working with us. A couple of discussion topics that we went through. The first one was responsibilities of ringside physicians as it relates to the physician's request that the referee stop the bout. The work group members present on the call discussed an admin rule submitted by Dr. Schramm. It was a draft, and he just took off. But anyway, the group was in favor of the proposed rule draft and suggests that it should be included in any future rule packets. Colleen will make any formatting and wording changes necessary for rulemaking purposes. So we're looking at that as either a rule change recommendation or a policy implementation. The next item was the roles of lead ringside physician. The lead physicians will be appointed by the TDLR Combative Sports Program personnel for major events. In other words, events where there's more than the standard 2 physicians. Lead physician will serve as the main contact point during the event for TDLR staff, officials, emergency crews, and promoters. Additional lead physician duties, including assigning duties to the other physicians working the event and evaluating the need for a translator for contestants not fluent in English. We understand that that can be an issue for you at ringside doing your pre-bout or post-bout ringside evaluations if that person isn't fluent or is not English speaking at all. The work group discussed the need for the lead physician to make a quick and decisive evaluation of the contestant's condition. Doing so will enable timely injury treatment if the bout is stopped, yet will not impede the flow of the contestant if the injury is not will not impede the flow of the contest if the injury is not severe enough to stop the bout. So that was one of the things that the docs brought up in that, let's get in there, let's take a look at it. We're not there to treat it, we're there to evaluate it. If treatment needs to be done, the fight should be stopped and we move on. If not, we don't want to take the advantage away.
Jim, Randolph Taylor.
Yes, sir.
Quick question. Do we have a relationship with language lines, something like that?
With what?
A language line or?
I'm not familiar with that.
Colleen
Translation
Tran-
line, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
translation line.
Colleen Tran, Assistant General Counsel. I don't believe that this division uses it, but I know that our inspector division that does our field inspections for all of our programs that have an inspection component, they do have an option to use, and I believe it is called language line. So that is possibly something that one of the future work groups should look into
Okay.
as a possibility or as an option, because our agency is familiar with it.
Language line. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Next item was concussion evaluation, baseline testing, and tracking. I had shared a somewhat brief Excel sheet with y'all via email addressing this, and it just went through a few of the states that are busy or similarly busy to Texas. We, again, are second in the nation to California in activity. But we looked at Texas, Nevada, Missouri, Illinois, California, Ohio, New Jersey. And just real quickly, the two things we talked to them about, or that I talked to them about, was baseline MRI, MRA, CT, or EEG. In other words, a baseline for licensing purposes when they first get licensed. We don't do any. Nevada, at the time I talked to them, they said yes, they do an initial MRA, and that's the only one they do. Then they do an MRI each 5 years. And as far as any pre or post bout testing of any type, just again, as prescribed by the ringside physician. Jumping back up one line to Texas, we of course do the EEG for anyone over 35, and then by anything that the doctor suggests. Missouri does neither MRIs or EEGs. Illinois does not do any. California does the MRI, and now they've also started doing the C3 Logics and or the King-Devic tests as a baseline, and then they will also recommend or demand by suspension a test for up to 45 days after concussion. They may say, okay, you've got from now till 45 days out to come back in and have another King-Devic or a C3 Logic test done.
They have somewhere around 60 units around the state of California. So their inspectors are trained on how to get access to them and how to help along with that process. As far as baselines, New Jersey, and again, I spoke with Nick Lembo, and I know you've probably been in touch with Dr. Walken. And at the time I talked with Nick, they did a CT scan or MRI every 2 years. And again, none of the post or pre-bout tests are done with the exception of California, which we just mentioned. In Ohio, they'll require MRI prior to the next bout if a contestant has suffered X number. He didn't give me a number. He says, but we have a number that we look at either in a row or in the last 12 months, whatever, and it says if you've suffered that many knockouts, then you're going to need an MRI before you can fight again. So there's not a lot of post-test procedures going on with the concussion testing, which is kind of laid out by Dr. Taylor's good presentation earlier. Dr. Taylor will communicate information to the work group via email regarding testing methods such as King David, C3 Logic, and other systems for evaluation of concussions. Jim Erickson will contact Dr. Lowry in San Antonio regarding his involvement with a current head injury study that might benefit the work group discussion. When I spoke with Dr. Lowry, his testing is more done with baseline pro fighters that have not had extensive amateur careers. He wants, I think what they're looking at is the effect that pro boxing has on the fighter, not boxing from when they started when they were 12 or 13. And I guess it would be similar to the case of the NFL saying, well, you know, we need to look back at these football players when they were in college. What happened there? We can't say that this is all from pro football. So I think his is for more of the fighter that may have jumped into the pro ranks after 5 or 10 or 20 amateur fights, but he, you know, didn't seem to think it correlated a lot with some of the other things that we were doing, but in the same aspect was addressing a concussion problem. And again, I had given you all the contact information for him, so if it intrigues you, you can certainly get a hold of him. There was some grant money talked about, and it would be his place to tell you what that was all about too. I also had talked to a individual that is part of a study initiated by the Cleveland Clinic, and they have a branch in Las Vegas where they'll have these fighters come in once a year for 4 years, and they do C3 Logic, they do MRI, they do a lot of questioning and testing of them, and they're going to track these fighters for 4 years. They've kind of leaned toward going toward retired fighters because active fighters seem to come in and use it as a way to get their medicals done so they can continue fighting and they don't come back again. So it's in the first stages, but it's something that is, again, started by the Cleveland Clinic and sent out to some of its branches. So you all would probably have as much or more information on that if you wanted to research it than I do. Information sharing seminar. We're talking about the work group being interested in moving forward with an information or best practices seminar. Again, I'd mentioned Dr. Walken earlier. I believe she was here in 2014 and did a seminar. And Dr. Lee, you were a big part of that, I believe, too. Yes. It was before my time here, but looking back at some of the information that I've gathered. Target audience includes ringside physicians, officials, and regulators. And as we were putting this together and discussing this, Colleen Tron had mentioned the fact that maybe inspectors should be encouraged, if not required, to attend, so that when they're back in the locker room, if they see something odd after a fight with a fighter that exhibiting nausea or sleepiness or something like that. So when we get to the point where we want to discuss this, we'd love to hear your thoughts as a group on this as well. And let's see, that's it for this work group report. Any questions on that call? Again, it was from January 17th.
Any questions?
Oh, okay, next one was the Industry Issues Work Group Conference call. Again, that was January 18th, the next day. Blaine was in on that call. Chris Reed Colleen and myself, and the main discussion topic was malpractice insurance for ringside physicians. It was noted by the work group that it's been an item that's been discussed in the past several years without a specific solution being reached. The rising cost of malpractice insurance may soon affect the participation of ringside physicians by some of our current pool of physicians. Charles Johnson, at that point, had a statutory change idea regarding the possible extension of state sovereignty or immunity to the physician while working on behalf of the state as a regulated event. Once Colleen dug into that, it's not something that's going to be as easy as extending that sovereignty or anything like that. Colleen had come up with some other suggestions that I'll let her articulate.
Colleen
would,
Tran,
please.
Assistant General Counsel. So in my research on that issue, there are a couple of things that occurred to me. Was one, a lot of it would have been in the insurance code and or your medical practice acts for physicians, and seeing as the legislature took regulatory authority of physicians from TDLR, it was overreach for us to dabble in statutes that are not ours. And it's twofold, is that these are definitely statutory changes that need to happen, and they are not our statutes at TDLR, which is the problem. So the suggestion is that if it is something that is important for a physician to address, those are things that your associations or your governing board, medical board, would need to address for physicians, because that's not under our regulatory power. Strat planning is going on now, so it would be the perfect time, because the legislature doesn't meet until January, to start reaching out to your associations on these particular issues, just like the ones for us with the fees and everything, reaching out to us on things that we actually have purview over, to start trying to look at what statutory changes or rule changes, but for this one, statutory, would need to happen.
It's, I guess, Randolph Taylor, one of the concerns I guess I have is all physicians actually don't look highly upon combative sports. So I mean, I know my association alone does not condone it. So that's what, I mean, taking it back to them, I mean, I don't see why they would want to change that, because it doesn't support their statement. So I guess that's kind of where we are, whereas we do identify this as a true sport, similar to any other contact sport, and we are willing to keep the athletes safe by being present. So that's a tough recommendation, I guess, if we want to get quality physicians to continue to cover.
Uphill, definitely.
I have a statement. Manuel Gonzalez. I know we have problems with getting physicians, and I've been working at this for a long time. And I've had obstetricians work next to me, pain guys, ophthalmologists, all kinds of, during the years. And I've always brought up this thing about malpractice, and it's because it behooves us to protect the body, to protect the state from problems. Now, I understand that it's very difficult for a pediatrician to go to their society and say, hey, we want to be indemnified, or whatever you want to call it. And for the good of the fighter, I think that people that do a lot of this type of service, people that do that in their practice, should have medical malpractice. So when you have your medical malpractice as a physician, that means if you have it for a trauma, that they'll cover you for head trauma, for any kind of trauma. When you have that, that means that you're actively practicing in that particular field. So that's good for the fighter. It's not the guy that does it every, once a year. You might see a headache or somebody fall down, a little scratch. See, that's the thing that we're gonna be concerned with, because there's a lot of physicians, like you were saying, that they look down on this sport. You talked a lot, oh, they hit too much, or it's, even women, very few women that like the sport in our field and as a medical person. So I feel, you know, to me is we ought to really look at this because we need physicians. We also need practicing physicians that have the experience to identify something we might not be able to, like head trauma. It's you know, it could happen to anybody. It could happen to any doctor can be there. He'd be the best neurosurgeon in the world, and the day after he gets an epidural hematoma, the guy dies, everybody gets angry. But in that situation, the physician, if they come after him like they did in New York with that particular horrible situation, the guy has backing. He says, hey, I am a board certified XXX. I got this and I have my malpractice. But if it's a OB-GYN, obstetrician, and they come after him,
Yeah.
they're going to say, oh, okay, well, you don't have anything? Let's go after the board. Let's go after the state. They're going to go after the deep pocket.
And I guess, Doctor, one more question, because, I mean, there are other states that have done it. I mean, Florida's done it. California's done it. New Jersey and New York, before they took on UFC, or MMA, they made sure they had that in place. So I guess, what have they already done that we as a state could piggyback on?
I'm dipping in again, Mary Winston. We don't have the authority currently. Strategic planning, this is something we can take into consideration. Charles had begun to look at it, and then Charles is retired, and every time I see him, he's gardening. He said it's called something else, but when you're retired, it's called gardening. So this is, again, the right time. There are states that do it. We obviously can make no promises. This is something we can look at, and this is the time to look at it, and that is what we can do. And giving us the states, and we will do research on other states and how they accomplish that, so we can do that. And put forth, again, another good idea from Combative Sports for our strategic planning process. We don't know, but we can try.
Okay, appreciate the input, thank you. Any other questions on this topic before we move on? Okay, next work group, we talked about health and safety. Again, that was January 18th. With scheduling issues and some last-minute cancellations, Colleen and I were the two people that were there for that meeting. And the discussion topic was weight cutting in the California 10-point plan system, or plan. None of the work group members called in, so the time was utilized to familiarize Colleen with the issue of drastic weight cutting dehydration in the California 10-point. So I kind of helped her get a little bit of an insight into what we all are facing with this, and to try to get some feedback from her and at least arm her with some information to address this as we move forward. As long as we're on that dehydration weight cutting information, again, we've talked quite a bit about the California plan. I also sent out a comparison with the same states, Texas, Nevada, Missouri, Illinois, California, Ohio, and New Jersey. And the four things we looked at was the second day weigh-in, check for dehydration, what method they're using, license by weight class, if they're doing it or not, and the target maximum weight gain if there is a second day weight gain, or weigh-in. Of the states mentioned, Illinois does a second day weigh-in. They target 10 pounds, but they're reevaluating that because 10 pounds to 118 pounder is different than 10 pounds to 160 pounder. So they're looking at going at a sliding percentage. California does a second day, and they look at 10% as a gain. Ohio, they look at 155 pounds. If you're under 155, 9 pounds is your max. If you're over 155, 13 pounds is the max. And again, they're looking at probably doing a percentage as opposed to a hard number. New Jersey does not do second day weigh-ins. Ohio does them. Oh, I mentioned that what their parameters were. They do them for pro-am cards, in that mostly MMA, to where there's going to be, and by pro-am he meant lower level cards, where there's going to be these guys that come in that aren't being regulated by someone, a nutritionist or anything. They're just doing these massive weight cuts on their own. So they don't really do them on a consistent basis with any of the other high-profile events. As far as check for dehydrations, it's all via pre-bout physical exam, except California, which of course they use their 10-point plan. And New Jersey, they're also doing what Dr. Brown is doing, is they're using very specific questions regarding the weight cut as part of the pre-bout examination. So that was the information to share with the dehydration. Any questions or comments on that? If not, no? Okay. If not, the drug testing work group, January 17th, in attendance, Dr. Schramm was there, Colleen, Charles, and myself. Discussion topics was testing methods and thresholds. Dr. Schramm suggested having a state employee familiar with this subject in attendance at the next board meeting, and I was to check on that. A lot of the departments I checked said, oh, we farm it out, we farm it out. We thought we had Scott come in, and I hope Scott was beneficial. His presentation was beneficial to you. Dr. Schramm was in support of using USADA WADA lists for prohibited substances, as well as USADA WADA thresholds, in an effort to keep things consistent. And that was kind of the big thing, was trying to get a consistency. There is no national governing body for boxing, in that there is very few federal laws that govern boxing, but not so much the actual commissions are not in step with each other. So this would be one method to close that gap a little bit and at least give some consistency to the drug testing. I shared, as Dr. Gonzalez mentioned earlier, he went into the website that I shared that listed all the different substances, all the different supplements they test, and do a side-by-side from what we do, which was that simple list that I had sent of an actual drug test result. It's best to look at that and then to spend some time relaxing and go through that long list, because it's very, very extensive. Combative Sports, okay, and then we also had him talk about, him being Scott, talk about the logistics and costs by using USADA and WADA certified labs. I think we had a good conversation about that earlier. Again, the same states, we did some reaching out and talked to them: Texas, Nevada, Missouri, Illinois, California, Ohio, New Jersey. The areas we queried them on was contestants tested per event, how many or when. Are you testing for drugs of abuse? Are you testing for PEDs or performance-enhancing drugs? And which labs are they using? And what drug panel and threshold? And are you doing out-of-competition testing? So Texas, we do major title plus random. We test for DOAs. We test for PEDs in pro MMA events. The labs we use currently is MedTox. The drug panel and threshold is per the MedTox and internet or national guidelines, as Scott had mentioned. We do not do out-of-competition testing. Nevada, they test all their contestants. They test for both DOA and PED. They use two different labs. They use Quest and WADA. Nevada uses Quest for initial tests and for the lower level events, and then they'll use WADA for confirmation of positives. And again, to get to the WADA labs, isotope testing and things like that, a little more in-depth testing. Drug panel and thresholds, they go by WADA standard, and they do conduct out-of-comp testing. Missouri, they do major titles plus random. They do DOA. They do not do PEDs. They use local labs to where whatever company, they don't use one specific company. They'll come in, and depending on what part of the state they're in, they'll use different companies. They'll send to different labs in that part of the state. And they do a 10 panel and whatever that local lab uses for thresholds. That's what they use. They do have a threshold for THC, but the rest of them seem to be somewhat fluid. Out-of-state testing, they do not, or I'm sorry, out-of-competition testing, they do not do. Illinois, they do titles plus random, both DOA and PEDs. They use the Redwood toxicology, both their labs and their panels and thresholds. No out-of-comp testing. California, titles plus random, both DOA, PED. They use WADA for their lab and WADA for their panel and thresholds, and they do conduct out-of-comp testing. Ohio, Titles Plus Random, both DOA PED, WADA labs, and WADA standards except THC, what they maintain that at 50 nanograms per milliliter. No out-of-comp testing. Last state is New Jersey. They do all titles and main events. They do both DOA PED. They use local labs and LabCorp, and they do a drug panel of a 20 panel plus Jersey checks for steroids, diuretics, masking agents, blocking agents, and testosterone. And they do conduct out-of-comp testing for major events. That's kind of a rundown of what the different, more prominent commissions across the country are doing. All right. The THC thing we had shared earlier, and I kind of cut it down a little bit to match the same states. And this is the last item on that. The THC level constituting a positive result for Texas is 50, Nevada 150, Missouri 50, Illinois 50, California 150, Ohio 50, New Jersey 50. And then you swing over to some of the bigger organizations. Department of Transportation is 50, Major League Baseball is 18, the NBA is 35, the NFL is 35, and World Cup Soccer is 150. Now, on those low levels on the, I heard some feedback on the Major League Baseball and NBA. They almost look at THC as a counselable offense, if you will. It's not a PED, but it's something that after, I think they have a graduated, depending on how many times you test positive for it, they'll try to get you into counseling first. If that doesn't work, and they have a, so although the numbers are low, they do pay attention to it. They just don't do the immediate hard suspension for THC. And that, gentlemen, was the last of the work group reports. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to help you with them.
Any questions? No. Thank you.
I had one response for Mr. Hadley. The senior prosecutor, Charlotte Melder, you asked about the unlicensed events. Actually, the reported events, now Texas is a huge state, but unless we know about them, there's nothing we can do. It's actually gone down. In 2016 fiscal year, there were 13 that we had action on. 2017, 6. Thus far, 2018, we have 2. So.
Carrie, a quick question back.
Yes.
As an official, had, in just probably the last 3 months, 11 phone calls requesting, hey, would you work this event? And it's from other officials or a promoter. So immediately I know, being state assigned, if these guys don't assign us to events, something's up.
Yes.
So I guess my question is it still our protocol just to notify Greg or Lee or
We
Jim?
would, yes, Lee is nodding. We would have to get a complaint.
And the reason I'm asking is I was at a New Mexico function, and they're having a huge issue with it because they've always just kind of pushed it to the side. And I've been asked to work probably 15, 20 events in New Mexico that's not. So they've started enforcing, and that was my big question. They said once we enforced like 5 or 6 and really pursued it, it stopped. But it seems like to me the number of calls I'm getting, I just feel like it's going the other way, and that's why I brought up the question.
We need to have a conversation.
Okay,
So, and
good.
you know who the players are
Yes.
to discuss, so yes.
Because I am also seeing it increased, and you see them on social media, and it's the hard sparring or the charity thing, but they're still meeting the criteria that would require to go through TDLR. So, but you will certainly keep you guys informed.
Thank you.
Thank you for the response.
Okay, going to TLR, based on finishing where are we at this point?
Item G.
Item G, discussion and possible appointment of work groups. Item 1, rules, work group to review and make recommendations regarding streamlining and updating the combative sports rules.
Dr. Lee, as chair of this board, you make those appointments. And we discussed earlier that some of our rules need to be updated. We still refer to paper tickets, so we don't have modern language for what we are doing today. So this is a little bit of an overhaul to update. And Dr. Lee will be making those appointments.
So, okay. So this is for a study and work group with the department staff on matters related to medical protocols. Assign the following issues to the work group. A, review and modify medical forms. B, concussion evaluations pre and post fights. C, lead physician responsibilities and appropriate specialties.
Okay, this is the current list of work groups
Okay.
that you have appointed, and we discussed that you may want to refigure some of them. And so the groups that we have on G are possible new work groups or new configurations that you'd be interested in pursuing.
So that would be the item 2.
G1, Rules Work Group to review and make recommendations regarding streamlining and updating the combative sports rules. That's taking a look at all of the rules, making sure they're current for what's really happening. It's been a while since we've had an update. So if you would like to appoint members to that group, that would be great. And then we can just go to G2 and G3, which may call for reconfiguring what we have on this sheet, and that's okay. It's your call.
So for the rules work group,
I would volunteer for that.
I would too.
okay.
Did
So
you get that,
state
Tim?
your name.
Gary
Chris
Hatley.
Reed.
Sorry,
Chris Reed?
Yes, Reed. And second,
Gary Hatley.
one more.
Sure.
So,
Blaine City.
Blaine, so, all right. And how many do we need per group?
You'd have up to 4.
Okay, I'll put myself on that one as well. Okay, and so that would be taking care of the review and modify of medical forms, concussion evaluations pre and post fights.
No, sir.
No.
We're gonna just turn that page over.
Okay. Okay.
Not gonna look at that, and we're gonna go back to the agenda. And on
Thank you,
G1,
man.
I'm kind of confused.
Yeah, over here, Becca.
turn that paper over. We're gonna
Yeah.
stick to the agenda.
Okay.
That's
We're
gonna
gonna
be
do this.
for the
Okay.
rules work group.
That's a rules work.
Yes, for G1.
Okay.
Tam handed those out just to kind of let you know what you'd already done, but
Oh, okay.
we're
So
gonna turn that over.
now, G2
Yes.
is medical health and safety work group
Yes.
to review and make recommendations on medical health, safety requirements, and rules in combative sports industry.
And let's not forget Dr. Schramm as you are making these appointments.
Right, and
They could keep the same people.
Yeah, we have the same.
Yeah.
Well,
You can leave that,
I got confused in the first one. You threw me a curveball here.
no problem. The first work group that we discussed is a rules work group.
Okay,
Just
then do
to-
this.
Turn that over, turn it over.
And what does that include?
This includes a run-through of the entire set of rules. There's some updates that we know need to happen, but they happen with input from the board. And there may be other things that you find in there. So some things may overlap, because this group is going to look at the rules overall. And we have Dr. Lee, Blaine, Mr. Reed, and Mr. Hadley on that. So the second work group that we're looking at is specific to medical health and safety. Okay, now let's turn our other sheet over.
thank you so much for the assistance.
So on this one, you can leave the same work group. You can make changes. We did want to get that rules work group. So we've done that, and we've gotten that out the way. You can choose to keep the same people on medical health and safety, as well as, let's see, drug testing. I think we had this kind of separated, between some of the work groups.
Well, I mean, we have some, well, the only problem with that is that we have a couple of people who are not here on the group.
You can go ahead and appoint those.
You can reappoint,
You can reappoint?
or you can appoint who's not here. They don't have to be present to be
No
voluntary.
fault for leaving, huh?
That's the advantage of being here.
That's right.
Yeah. What I'm gonna do is take my baton off of the group
Okay. Medical health and safety?
on medical health and safety.
Okay.
And,
Call out the names.
so the group will include Dr. Gonzalez, myself, Mick Maynard, and that's how many? 1, 2, that's 4?
Dr. Lee, I believe Dr. Schramm would like to be on that one. I think he voiced.
Okay, then I'll take myself off and put Dr. Schramm in my place. Yes, Lee.
Leaves you one.
Dr. Lee?
Yes,
This
sir.
is Lee Parham. Mick Maynard, he's not responded to any of our outreach, nor has he been to any of the meetings. So,
Okay.
I would not appoint him to a committee.
So we have Dr. Gonzalez, Dr. Schramm, and who else do we have on that
I would
committee?
like someone non-medical, so that way we have some balance.
I wouldn't mind if
Ms.
you need
Reed?
someone, I'll volunteer for it.
We need some.
Okay, I'll do
Reed?
it.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
brothers.
Thank you.
You guys
All right, so that way we have 4. Is
The
that
fourth
correct?
is you?
The 4th is myself.
Yes. Yes, perfect.
And the last group is the industry.
The last group we're going to be operating from the actual agenda. So that's drug testing protocols, review and make recommendation regarding drug testing protocols, requirements, and rules.
So that's Dr. Schramm.
Dr. Schramm.
Taylor, I can work with Sharon.
Dr. Taylor. Any of the non-physicians want to participate on the drug testing?
Mr. Hadley?
Okay, Mr. Hadley.
Peer pressure again.
Peer pressure, peer pressure.
Thank
Well,
you.
Do you want to?
Am I on the first one here?
You're on the first one.
It's a different.
It's a different one.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna be in everything.
You're in everything
Might as
kind of
well.
guy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
That'd be
Dr.
good.
Dr. Gonzalez.
Okay, great.
My name everywhere.
Okay. So do we have those items now covered?
We are good,
The
yes.
groups are now rearranged?
Groups are rearranged. Staff will be contacting you. Thank you for your service.
Okay, now before we go on to the H item, since you're mentioning the vacancies, what is the protocol in terms of,
Appointments?
well, action in terms of the vacancies before we replace them? Is there a procedure or?
There's a process that you all are appointed by, of course, the commission. And so there's an internal process of review, and we'll handle that, and we will let you know. You don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, because if we're gonna be able to do stuff, we need a full,
Yes.
because sometimes even
Yes.
us, we're not able to attend.
Yes. And Lee has made it quite clear on the record today that there may be changes or a need for it, so we got it. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Lee.
All right, moving on to H, recommendations for agenda items for the next advisory board meeting.
Dr. Lee, this is Colleen Tran, Assistant General Counsel. Definitely we'll hear from the new work groups that you have, and hopefully they'll have recommendations. So that will be one of your agenda items for sure, work group reports and hopefully recommendations from them.
Okay. Now, one thing that I would put on here, would that still fall under the drug testing group in terms of getting the current lab to give us policies and procedures? Would that fall under that, or can we do that without going through a work group?
You just want the current lab's policies and
They
procedures?
don't have one.
Oh, okay.
That's what we found out from the
Okay,
meeting,
yes.
that there is none, so we want them to at least work on one and submit it so that we can look at it.
That can be with the drug protocol work group to get that information, because you're gonna be working with staff. So, Jim is nodding, and he gave me eyebrows at least. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Yes, well, that'll be in that work group.
Okay, then item
Report.
H, discussion of date and time and location of the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, we've got 3 Fridays identified here, August 24th, August 31st, or September 14th. I will warn you that August 31st is the beginning of the Labor Day weekend.
That's no. And so it was the 24th or the 31st, and then the next one is when?
September 14th.
And that's well after Labor Day. Is there anything from the commission standpoint that needs to be addressed by August?
No, you're good.
Does anyone on the panel have any issues that they would like to meet in August rather than in September. All right, so does everyone seem comfortable with the September date?
Yeah.
We'll do the September date.
What time in the morning then would you?
10 work.
10, that cuts down some of the traffic, especially if you're driving from out of town. So 10 o'clock on September 14th.
Got it. Thank you.
All righty. Any other concerns, comments? It went over, but thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned.